Every single time you open your banking app, or you browse a secure website, or you make a digital payment, you're essentially taking a leap of faith. But have you ever stopped to ask where that trust actually comes from? Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty radical new way of thinking about trust in our digital world. We're going to explore a model that isn't built on faith at all, but on performance. So here's the game plan. First, we'll unpack the fundamental problem with trust as we know it today. Then, we'll look at the solutions we've tried and why they're flawed. After that, we'll introduce this new model based on performance, see how you can actually build it step by step, and finally, get to its most powerful feature, a network that can actually heal itself.
All right, so let's jump right into the core issue. Every digital system we rely on, from our banks to our web browsers, is built on a kind of hierarchy of trust. But what happens when you follow that chain of command all the way to the very top?
Yeah, this is the question that really keeps digital architects up at night. Think about it. If your bank's digital agent was created by the bank, and the bank's authority was created by some government body, who created them? Where does that chain actually stop? At some point, someone somewhere just had to point a finger and declare, okay, that entity right there, that's the one we trust.
And this is the uncomfortable truth, isn't it? That original source of trust, that root, wasn't chosen because it proved its worth. It was just appointed. It's really a political decision dressed up as a technical one. And that creates a massive fragility. Because if that one root authority is ever compromised, the entire system built on top of it is now in question. The single point of trust just became the single point of failure.
So, when you're faced with a problem like that, what's the first thing you think of? The instinctive reaction is to just find an ultimate, unshakable, unbreakable source of truth. And this leads us to the idea of a God node. A concept that, as we're about to see, is just deeply flawed. We call this the God node. It's this idea that if we can just find one entity that's permanent, all-powerful, totally beyond question, we can build our entire system on it and just never have to worry again. It sounds great, right? It's a really simple, appealing solution. But this is where the fantasy crashes into reality. On the left, you've got the God node fantasy, which totally assumes permanence is a given. But on the right, you have what the real world actually needs, which is resilience. Because let's be honest, anything can fail. I mean, Lehman Brothers was a pillar of the financial system, a God node in its own way, until one day it just wasn't. A network it depends on a permanent root can't handle that reality. It's forced to either pretend the node is immortal or just completely collapse when it inevitably fails.
So what it all boils down to is this. Creating a God node doesn't actually fix the problem of centralization. It doesn't magically distribute trust. Nope. It just concentrates all the risk and gives that single point of failure a much, much fancier name.
Okay, so if a designated all-powerful authority isn't the answer, then what is? Well, this brings us to a really fundamental shift in thinking. What if trust isn't something that's declared from the top down, but instead it's something that's earned from the bottom up? And this breaks it down perfectly. On the left, you have the old way, declared trust. It's just handed down, forcing you to take that leap of faith in some authority you've probably never even met. But on the right, we have this new model, observed trust. It's not a belief, it's a conclusion that you draw yourself, based on watching something perform successfully and dependably over and over again. This whole process of earning trust is built on something called a recognition event, and it's actually incredibly simple. Step 1, 2 parties do something together, they transact. Step 2, the outcome is successful. The payment clears, the package arrives, everything works as expected. Step 3, that successful, verified outcome isn't just a one-off transaction. It becomes a piece of evidence. It's a little building block of trust that doesn't rely on any big external authority at all.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds great in theory, but how in the world do you actually build a network like this from scratch, right? Who goes first when nobody trusts anyone yet?
Well, the answer is actually pretty elegant. You don't start from scratch out in the wild. You grow the new system inside an existing trusted one. So, for example, a bank could run a new, unproven payment channel right alongside its old legacy one. For every single transaction, both systems have to produce the exact same result. The new system gets to prove its reliability over and over without ever putting a single customer's money at risk. It earns trust by proving it's just as good as the old way. And what's really cool is, as this network grows, trust isn't just a simple yes or no thing. It actually develops in layers, creating what you could call a trust gradient. So you start at layer 0. That's just a simple digital identity you create yourself, like a cryptographic key pair. Then at layer 1, it gets social. Alice vouches for Bob. It's reputational. At layer 2, things get more serious. An institution like a bank recognizes your agent. Now there's legal and economic weight behind it. And finally, you get to layer 3, where multiple big institutions all recognize the same agent. Now you've got systemic trust, the kind you need for really high-stakes interactions.
So now we get to what is maybe the most profound consequence of building trust this way. What happens when something in the network eventually breaks? Because things always break.
Well, because trust is a track record, it's this big accumulation of proven successful events. A single failure doesn't cause the whole thing to come crashing down. It doesn't magically invalidate all the good performance that came before it. All it does is update our assessment of that actor moving forward. The damage is completely contained.
This analogy is just perfect for explaining it. Think about it. Your 10 years of fantastic meals at that restaurant, that's still a fact. That happened. The failed health inspection is also a fact. It just means you're probably not going to eat there tomorrow. The system just adopts based on new information without having to destroy its own history. That is what true resilience looks like.
So after all this talk about technical architecture and networks, what have we actually learned? It turns out the answer to our big question, where does trust come from, isn't some complicated certificate or a top-down declaration. It's actually something we all intuitively understand.
At the end of the day, trust simply comes from the accumulated evidence of dependable action. It's built through a history of successful encounters, one event at a time. It's not about finding some immortal, all-powerful authority to place your faith in. It's about creating a system where participants can prove their worth just by showing up and doing what they say they're going to do.